Hey guys, it's Casey for MMIP Riffs, and these are 3 ridiculous things about 50 Shades of Grey. So I played Christian Grey in a parody show of 50 Shades of Grey a few months back, which means I also read the book. I also had a friend who was acting in the movie, and so that's the main reason why I went and saw it. And I could go on a 2-hour spiel about everything that was wrong with this movie, but here are the 3 most ridiculous things. Number 1, a half-assed commitment to the source material. Now, what I love is that the script itself for the movie was actually a little bit better than the book, but they tried to just only fix so many things about the book that it just seemed like they weren't committing to the book well enough. You know, they tried to improve this poorly written book by removing all of the inner goddess lines that Anna says, as well as the tampon scene. But there were still so many atrocious lines, some of which weren't in the book to begin with. Some of the sex scenes were toned way down, and I can realize why they did that. They wanted to appeal to a more general audience. They wanted to fill up their pocketbooks by making it more appealing to a general audience. But the problem is that if you're going to make a controversial film, you have to commit to the controversy. In spite of a female director and a female writer and a female helmed cast trying to make this a more gender equal film, Christian Grey still came off as a control freak with boundary issues, and Anna still came off as someone who lives under a rock, being a 21-year-old college student who has never had an orgasm, a laptop, or an email address. And I'm sorry, I can't believe that a 21-year-old living in Washington State has never been into downtown Seattle. You want to know how I know she never had been? Because she was looking up at all the buildings, including Christian Grey's, and going, wow. That's not the sign of a Washington State resident. That's the sign of a tourist. Seattle, LA, Chicago, you know what I'm talking about. Number 2, it's a slap in the face to the ABCs. What are the ABCs, you ask? A is for acting. And no, I'm not talking about how well they acted in this film, though most of that was pretty bad. I'm talking about Dakota Johnson acting like she wasn't a ditz, even though she totally came off as one who made nothing but poor life choices. And Jamie Dornan, who plays Christian Grey, acting so very hard to not have a thick Irish accent. That was hilarious, on top of the fact that they still came off as flat one-dimensional characters. B is for BDSM. Now, I'm not personally a part of the BDSM community, but I have lots of friends and acquaintances who are, and pretty much they all agree that this movie does in no way reflect a healthy, safe BDSM relationship. Whether you agree with the views or values of the BDSM community, no one should be using this movie as a reflection of that community and that kind of dominant submissive relationship. Which brings me to C. C is for consent. You've been hearing a lot of people talk about the lack of consent that appears in this story. And it's true. There's so many times in which the characters let their passions take over for them, and they completely disregard a written contract that was so very well thought out because of their passions, and it leads to discussions about rape and abuse in this movie, when really it should be about the love and the sex. It's a big problem. And a lot of people are discussing this and why so many people are boycotting this movie because of the overall lack of consent that appears in it. For example, the ending. Spoiler alert. In the end, Christian Grey says, I really want to, but I don't want to punish you. And she's like, well, I think I really want you to. And he's like, okay, you remember your safe words? Yeah, of course. Red, yellow, you know, that sort of thing. And she's totally okay with it, and then he starts beating her with his belt, and rather than say the proper safe word, she gets up off the table and says, you're all kinds of messed up, and then she leaves him. It's so poorly conceived, and it doesn't reflect consent at all, and it just goes to show that these people don't really know what the hell they're doing. Not the 20-year-old girl exploring her sexuality and trying to come off as incredibly strong, or the 27-year-old billionaire who's all about intelligence and control and just appears to have none of that in the majority of this movie. Number 3. I call this the Game of Thrones ridiculous thing. No dong shots whatsoever. Seriously, there is a real lack of penis in this movie, especially compared to how many times we see Dakota Johnson as Anna get buck naked for a scene. I can sense all the reasons why the filmmakers wanted to do this, to indicate a sense of control and a sense of dominance by Christian Grey by not having that happen. I also know that Jamie Dornan was under contract and had it in his contract that he would not have to show his junk. But all of these reasons sound like excuses. It sounds like one more punch that they pulled in this movie, which indicates to the sexism, as well as to women being overly sexualized in Hollywood film altogether, which has been a big debate that's only been further kindled by this movie. It only further justifies the argument so many have that the story debases and degrades women instead of reflecting on their independence and their strength. If you really wanted to show a realistic, understandable, dominant, submissive relationship, there should have been an equal amount of nudity from both sexes. Now, there were a few redeeming qualities about the film, I will give that. 2 great performances by 2 actresses. First off, Eloise Mumford. She played the best friend in the film, she had a very believable character arc, and she took some of her really terrible lines and terrible subplots and made you believe like she actually cared about the well-being of her best friend. Her character disappears about 45 minutes into the film into a terrible subplot, and that was a big mistake. 2. Marcia Gay Harden, Tony Award winner, Oscar winner, and has been so good in so many bad movies, in addition to some good ones. She plays Christian Grey's mother, does a fabulous Southern Belle job. She has a total of 5 minutes of screen time. That was also a terrible mistake by the filmmakers. And while this movie fails at the ABCs, it does get a D. The D is for discussion. Also, debate. And I think it's actually really cool that we are now discussing a lot more openly, partially due to this film and this book, about all the things that are right and wrong about a BDSM submissive dominant relationship, and about all the things involving consent and the potential of a lack of consent leading to terrible things such as rape and abuse. We also discuss a lot more about conventional gender roles and about the aspects of BDSM and what we agree with and what we don't. Let me give you my opinion. I believe you are totally allowed to debate everything right or wrong about this film and this book if you have read the book or seen the film. You know, you're completely entitled to your opinions, but your argument can only go so far based off of a Wikipedia article. Closing thoughts. If you haven't seen this film already, wait for it to come out on DVD or Netflix, get a bunch of drinks, laugh about it with your friends. If you saw this film and you thought it was the worst romantic drama / unintentional comedy you've ever seen, I highly recommend watching The Room. It's at least 3 or 4 times as unintentionally funny as this movie is. And if you want to see a great film that I believe reflects a healthy, safe BDSM relationship, I highly recommend the movie Secretary, starring Maggie Gyllenhaal and James Spader. So that's it for us for right now. Jim and I are still wrapping up and putting the finishing touches on our You're the Hunter from the Future movie riff that we did. We had a lot of fun making fun of that movie, and I can't wait for it to come out for you guys to see. So I'm Casey for MMIP Riffs. Thanks for tuning in.